Hi, hi. Today, on 26th of Jan 2022, we are going to read about the Hindu editorial, in which the first article which I'm going to study is why Republic Day is celebrated. India is a republic only when its laws result from free public discussion and pass open scrutiny. Once again, India is republic only when its laws result from free public discussion and pass open scrutiny. India is republic only when its laws result from free public discussion and pass open scrutiny. The preamble to the Constitution declares that India is a republic. This self description must be taken seriously. Being a republic is integral to India's political identity. Moreover, this is not just a descriptive but also a strong ethical normative claim. Being Republican is an ideal to which we are meant to consistently aspire, and when we go astray, we should know that we have done something wrong, feel remorse, and make amends. If our political identity loses its republican character, we must quickly act to restore it. It is because we cherish being a republic that, and on every January 26th since 1950, we celebrate this founding movement. The parade and the rituals surrounding it are meaningless unless we get the spirit behind the event. Against monarchy, what is meant by a republic and what is its significance? For a start, the primary collective intent behind a republic is anti monarchical. The Greeks defined monarchy as the rule of one mono, a form of government where one person rules and all others obey. One is sovereign, all others his subjects. We usually associated with the hereditary rule of Maharajas and Maharanis, but in the Greek definition of the term, it also covers rule by modern dictators, autocracy. But what is wrong with the rule of one person? Why fear rule by one person? Perhaps the most pernicious quality about monarchy is that it subjects people to the whim and fancy of one person, to his arbitrary will. One day he likes us and gives us, say, a grand grant. The next day he withdraws the grant and puts us in jail. All powers are vested in him. Godlike, he becomes judge and jury, makes and executes laws, decides when they are violated, and rewards and punishes as he pleases. All these decisions affecting us are taken without discussion, mysteriously, privately, and expressed as revealed truth. The entire decision making process remains close to his chest, hidden from everyone. It brooks neither transparency nor accountability. It is this tyrannical potential of the rule of one person, the absolute and arbitrary use of power that we dread. Government by discussion. What alternative does a republic offer? The English word republic is derived from the Latin res publica, the public thing. This translates in the political domain into decision making in the open, in the full view of all. A republic then is associated with what we today call the public sphere, an open space where people put forward claims about what is good for the community, what is in collective interest. After discussing, debating, and deliberating upon them, they reach decisions about which laws to have and what course of action to take. A republic is government by free and open discussion. The contrast between monarchical and republican forms of government could not be sharper. Monarchy entails surrender to the arbitrary power of another person, allowing whimsical intrusion in our choices, living at the mercy of the master. It breeds slavery. Those who live for long periods under subjection of others tend to develop slavishness, a mental torpor difficult to dispel. Silenced, they lose a vibrant sense of their agency, or rendered without the capacity to think for themselves or take decisions about their own lives. For this reason, Gandhi used the idea of Swaraj to challenge not only political colonization by the British but the colonization of our minds. It is because one makes people unfree and enslaves them, that the republic, its alternative, is strongly associated with freedom. To have a republic is to have a free people. This is why Gandhi Swaraj is an important republican idea. And also why the republican tradition emphasizes the importance of citizenship. After all, to be citizen is to belong to a political community where one can express oneself and act freely. Citizens alone have political liberty. Without it, we are mere subjects. For republic lovers, political liberty means not unbridled freedom to do whatever one pleases, negative liberty, but to live by laws made by citizens themselves that are a product of their own will, not the arbitrary will of others. This explains why republics have a constitution generated by a deliberative body of citizens which provides the basic law of the land, the fundamental framework of governance. The phrase "we the people" in the Constitution is not a mere literary embellishment but central to a republican constitution. The willingness to live by self made regulations but enforced by public power or the state also means that those who value a republic are not against states per se but against those that take away our political freedom. Republic and democratic. It appears from what is said above that the word republic covers all that is meant by the term democratic. Our own Constituent Assembly initially took the view that since the word republic contains the word democratic, it may be unnecessary to use both. This would have been in keeping with the French Republican tradition, where the two terms are used interchangeably. Yet, after announcing its commitment to Sevilla, its links with an external imperial monarch and with all existing and future claims of local rajas and make India a republic. B.R. Ambedkar and Jawaharlal Nehru concerned that since an undemocratic republic is conceivable, a separate commitment to democratic institutions is necessary. This decision was correct. It was wise to keep both terms in the preamble. The idea of the republic conveys that decisions shall be made not only by a single individual but by citizens after due deliberation in an open forum. But this is consistent with a narrow criteria of who counts as a citizen. Ancient Roman republics were not inclusive. Ancient India probably had aristocratic clan republics, which were far from democratic. In ancient Greece, slaves, women, and foreigners were not considered citizens and excluded from decision making. Indeed, for many Greek thinkers, democracy had a negative connotation precisely because it was believed to involve everyone, including plebeians, what we contemptuously call the mob. What the term democratic brings to our constitution is that citizenship be available to everyone, regardless of their wealth, education, gender, perceived social ranking, religion, race, or ideological beliefs. The word democracy makes the republic inclusive. No one is excluded from citizenship, for example. All have the right to vote. At the same time, voting for practical reasons is restricted only to choosing representatives who, in the name of the people, make laws and policies. Then citizens must at least have the right to be properly informed, seek transparency and accountability from their government. A republic must, at the very least, have perpetually vigilant citizens who act as watchdogs, monitor their representatives, and retain the right to contest any law or policy made on their behalf. By going beyond mere counting of heads, the term republic brings free public discussion to our democratic constitution. It gives depth to our democracy. It is mandatory that discussions taken by the representatives of the people be properly deliberated, remain open to scrutiny, and be publicly, legally contested even after they have been made. When the farmers came out on the streets to peacefully challenge the three formulas made by the current government, they exercised not only their democratic rights but also exhibited the highest of republican virtues. Virtues. It is so it is to celebrate such political acts of citizens that we have the Republic Day. Rajiv Bhargava is a political philosopher and honorary fellow, the Center for the Study of Developing Societies, New Delhi. Once again, why Republic Day is celebrated? India is a Republic Day, Republic only when its laws result from free public discussions and pass open scrutiny. The preamble to the Constitution declares that India is a republic. This self description must be taken seriously. Being a republic is integrated to India's political identity. Moreover, this is not just a descriptive but also a strong ethical normative claim. Being Republican is an ideal to which we are meant to consistently aspire, and when we go astray, we should know what we have done something wrong, feel remorse, and make amends. If our political identity loses its Republican character, we must quickly act to restore it. It is because we cherish being a republic that on every January 26th since 1950, we celebrate this founding moment. The parade and the rituals surrounding it are meaningless unless we get the spirit behind the event. Against monarchy. What is meant by a republic and what is its significance? For a start, the primary collective intent behind a republic is anti monarchical. The Greeks defined monarchy as the rule of one, mono, a form of government where one person rules and all others obey. One is sovereign, all others his subjects. We usually associate it with the hereditary rule of Maharajas and Maharanis, but in the Greek definition of the term, it also covers rule by modern dictators, autocracy. But what is wrong with the rule of one person? Why fear rule by one person? Perhaps the most pernicious quality about monarchy is that subjects people to the whim and fancy of one person, to his arbitrary will. One day he likes us and gives us, say, a land grant. The next day he withdraws the grant and puts us in jail. All powers are vested in him. God-like, he becomes judge and jury, makes and executes laws, decides when they are violated, and rewards and punishes us as he pleases. All these decisions affecting us are taken without discussion, mysteriously, privately, and expressed as revealed truth. The entire decision-making process remains close to his chest. Hidden from everyone, it brooks neither transparency nor accountability. It is this tyrannical potential of the rule of one person, the absolute and arbitrary use of power that we dread. Government by discussion. What alternative does a republic offer? The English word republic is derived from the Latin res publica, the public thing. This translates in the political domain into decision making in the open, in full view of all. A republic then is associated with what we today call the public sphere, an open space where people put forward claims about what is good for the community, what is in collective interest. After discussing, debating, and deliberating upon them, they reach decisions about which laws which laws have to have, and what course of action to take. The republic is government by free and open discussion. The contrast between monarchical and republican form of government could be sharper. Monarchy entails surrender to arbitrary power of another person, allowing whimsical intrusion in our choices, living at the mercy of the master. It breeds slavery. Those who live for long periods under subjection of others tend to develop slavishness, a mental torpor difficult to dispel, silence, they lose a vibrant sense of their own agency, or render without the capacity to think for themselves or take decisions about their own lives. For this reason, Gandhi used the idea of Swaraj to challenge not only political colonization by the British, but the colonization of our minds. It is because we are ruled by one makes people unfree and enslaves them. That the republic, its alternative, is strongly associated with freedom. To have a republic is to have a free people. This is why Gandhi Swaraj is an important republican idea, and also why the republican tradition emphasizes the importance of citizenship. After all, to be a citizen is to belong to a political community where one can express oneself and act freely. Citizens alone have political liberty. Without it, we are mere subjects. For republic lovers, political liberty means not unbridled freedom to do whatever one pleases, negative liberty, but to live by laws made by citizens themselves that are a product of their own will, not the arbitrary will of others. This explains why republics have a constitution generated by an deliberative body of citizens which provides the basic law of the land, the fundamental framework of governance. The phrase "we the people" in the Constitution is not merely literary embellishment but central to Republican Constitution. The willingness to live and self made regulations but enforced by public power or state also means that those who value a republic are not against states per se but against those that take away our political freedom. Republic and democratic, it appears from what is said about that. The word republic covers all that is meant by the term democratic. Our own Constituent Assembly initially took the view that since the word republic contains the word democratic, it may be unnecessary to use both. This would have been in keeping with the French Republican tradition, where the two terms are used interchangeably, and after announcing its commitment to sever its links with an external imperial monarch and with all existing and future claims of local rajas and make India a republic. B.R. Ambedkar and Jawaharlal Nehru considered that since an undemocratic republic is conceivable, a separate commitment to democratic institutions is necessary. The decision was correct. This decision was correct. It was wise to keep both terms in the preamble. The idea of the republic conveys that decisions shall be made not by a single individual but by citizens after due deliberation in an open forum. But this is consistent with a narrow criteria of who counts as a citizen. Ancient Roman republics were not inclusive. Ancient India probably had aristocratic clan republics which were far from democratic. In ancient Greece, slaves, women, and foreigners were not considered citizens and excluded from decision making. Indeed, for many Greek thinkers, democracy had a negative connotation precisely because it was believed to involve everyone, including the plebeians, what we contemptuously call the mob. What the term democratic brings to our constitution is that citizenship be available to everyone, regardless of their wealth, education, gender, perceived social ranking, religion, race, or ideological beliefs. The word democracy makes the republic inclusive. No one is excluded from citizenship. For example, all have the right to vote. At the same time, voting for political reasons is restricted only to choosing representatives who, in the name of the people, make laws and policies. Then citizens must at least have the right to be properly informed, seek transparency and accountability from their government. A republic must at the very least, have perpetually vigilant citizens who act as watchdogs, monitor their representatives, and retain the right to contest any law or policy made on their behalf. By going beyond mere counting of heads, the term republic brings free public discussion to our democratic constitution. It gives depth to our democracy. It is mandatory that decisions taken by the representatives of the people be properly deliberated, remain open to scrutiny, and be publicly, legally contested even after they have been made. When the farmers came out on streets to peacefully challenge the free farm laws made by the current government, they exercised not only their democratic rights but also exhibited the highest of republican virtues. It is to celebrate such political acts of citizens that we have the Republic Day. a festival to salute India's vibrant democracy. The Republic Day this year is a time when citizens of India must rededicate themselves to fulfill their duties. Republic Day is not only an occasion to take pride in our identity as Indians, but also an occasion for the citizens of our country to reiterate our resolve to promote equality and brotherhood in the country. This year we are celebrating our 73rd Republic Day. This journey of our republic has had started on January 26, 1950, when we had resolved to abide by and remain faithful to the principles enshrined in our Constitution. On the day our Constitution came into force, India became a fully sovereign democratic republic. The Constitution has been our guiding force in the journey of the nation as a mature democracy among committee of nations. Much thought and work. The task of drafting the Constitution of India was assigned to a seven-member committee under the chairmanship of B.R. Ambedkar. The Constituent Assembly undertook intensive deliberations over a period of 2 years, 11 months, and 18 days spread over 11 sessions, during which the Constitution of India took shape, which was then adopted on November 26, 1949, January 26, 1950. January 26, 1950 was the momentous day when at least decades of struggle for true Swaraj finally bore fruit, and the supremacy of the sovereign will of the people was truly established. Our Constituent Assembly played a dual role after independence. Given the insurmountable task of nation building, on the one hand, there was the task of framing an enlightened constitution for an independent India, and on the other, to play the role of a legislature for the nascent nation. The Constituent Assembly of India acted as the first parliament of independent India. It is an interesting historical fact that Dr. Rajendra Prasad chaired the settings of the House when it met as the Constituent Assembly, while Ganesh Malvankar presided over as Speaker. When the House met as the legislature, our Constituent Assembly had performed the functions of the Provisional Parliament of India in the interval between the time our Constitution was enforced and the day when the new Parliament was formed following the first general elections October 25, 1951 to February 21st, 1952. May 13, 1952 was the historic date when the first sitting of the newly elected first Lok Sabha, representing the hopes and aspirations of the 36 crore citizens of India, was held. A beacon. Since then, in the 7.5 decades of this glorious journey, our Constitution has not only upheld the hopes and aspirations of the 135 crore population, but has also acted as an unwavering beacon of light, guiding us on the path of building a great and resilient country. Representative institutions and democratic traditions have always been an integral part of our rich heritage. This is why, when India adopted the modern form of democratic structure of governance after independence, it was a seamless transition which was much lauded the world over. Today, when we celebrate Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav to mark the 75th anniversary of our independence, it is high time for us to evaluate the gains made so far and the strive for a futuristic action plan of building a new India. We have to ensure that our institutions and governance ensure inclusivity and the participation of our population in our developmental journey, particularly our women, scheduled tribes, and all other marginalized sections become equal partners in our growth story. Parliament has been playing a pivotal role in the all-round development of the nation by adopting many parliamentary devices for ensuring free and fair discussions and dialogue. These devices have enabled the members to raise the concerns of the people in the House and to draw the attention of the government towards their satisfactory resolution, and also ensure transparency and accountability of the executive. help for legislators, MPs. To ensure that best legislative practices are shared, a national portal is being planned to serve as a repository of the proceedings of Parliament and all state, union, territory legislatures in the country. At the same time, measures are being taken to provide support for capacity building of the members of the Parliament. Research support is being provided to members to help them participate better and meaningfully in matters brought before Parliament. A dedicated parliamentary research team is being set up for this purpose. Our efforts are on to reform and strengthen the parliamentary committee system to make it more effective. Our goal is to make our legislatures a forum where meaningful, positive, and result oriented discussions are held. A legislature where all sides are able to put forth their opinions. A legislature where we are able to arrive at a resolution through a constructive dialogue while respecting divergent views. It is also time in the journey of our nation to take stock and review laws that were enacted during the pre-independence era so as to make them more relevant to our current requirements and future challenges. For this, all political parties will have to enter into a constructive and healthy understanding through mutual dialogue. Republic Day is an occasion for people's representatives and all citizens of this proud nation to reaffirm faith in these ideals enshrined in our Constitution. Baba Sahib Ambedkar, in his speech before the Constituent Assembly on November 4, 1948, had underlined that the basis of constitutional morality is to hold the values enshrined in the Constitution as paramount. Republic Day is also an occasion to contemplate as citizens our responsibility in the diligent discharge of our duties just as we continue to cherish our fundamental rights. A vision for the future. Let us celebrate this Republic Day as a festival and firmly dedicate ourselves to the fulfillment of our duties to bring happiness, prosperity, and a better quality of life for all our citizens in keeping with the vision of the father of our nation, Mahatma Gandhi, of creating an ideal democracy with morality at its core, discipline in the hearts of its citizens, and where everybody fulfilled their duties and the rights of all were protected. It is that vision which guides our constitution, and it is the same vision that should be our guide for the future. With this belief, I wish all my fellow countrymen a very happy Republic Day. Om Birla is Speaker, Lok Sabha. Letters to the editor. COVID and schooling. The article, The Devastating Impact of School Closure, would also highlight the simple, inexpensive, and an age-old method of learning, open air classes. India has a conducive climate for this, and it can be done. For millions of school children who will not be going to schools, this is a simple and inexpensive way out. Learning online has its limitations, and not all students have the luxury of internet access. Reports suggest that students have regressed because of lost classroom time, particularly students have regressed because of lost classroom time, particularly in the core subjects, and it is likely that there will be a lost generation. Physical interaction is also the best way to learn and communicate. Okay. Close on the heels of the controversy surrounding the Republic Day tabloids issue, which has yet to die down, comes another move by the Union government to drop a favor hymn. The government of the day appears to be fond of dropping anything that does not gel with its agenda. Any tune or music score that is pleasant is acceptable. Music cuts across all barriers. Those who made the decision to drop the hymn must beat a retreat. I am Septu Janarian and have been watching the beating retreat ceremony for years. It is an event of national pride and abide with me as has been part and parcel of the retreat ceremony. It is baffling what promoted What prompted the government to replace this good old song in what is essentially a solemn occasion? There are so many other issues to focus on than to make unwarranted changes. The powers that be that uh, that we must okay, next. Okay. For a civic solidarity, the Chakma Hajong people deserve citizenship and not racial profiling. The NHRC has done the right thing in directing the Ministry of Home Affairs and the Arunachal Pradesh government to submit an action taken report against the racial profiling and relocation of the Chakma and Hajong communities in the northeastern state. They had fled their homes in Chhattisgarh, in Chittagong Hill Tracts, in erstwhile state Pakistan, after losing land to the constitution of the Kaptai Dam on the Karnapuli River in the early 1960s. They had sought asylum in India and were settled in relief camps in Arunachal Pradesh. Since they have been well integrated in villages in the southern and southeastern part of the state, in 2015, the Supreme Court directed the state to grant them citizenship, but this has not yet been implemented. In judgment in 1996, the court had stated that the life and personal liberty of every Chakma residing with the state shall be protected in light of these orders, and given that most of the Chakma Hajong community members were born in the state and have been living peacefully, the Arunachal Pradesh Chief Minister's announcement in August 2021 that they would be relocated outside the state and that steps would be taken for a census of the communities was clearly unwarranted. The so-called state-driven census would have been amounted to a racial profiling of the so-called state-driven census would have amounted to a racial profiling of the two communities that have also been the subject of antagonist and nativist campaign by organizations such as the All Arunachal Pradesh Students Union. The issue has not been helped either by statements made earlier by the Union Minister of State for Home Kiran Rijiju about relocation. It is difficult but not impossible for any state government in the northeast to balance the interest of native tribal communities and those of legitimately settled refugees and their progeny. Special rights guaranteed in the Indian Constitution in these states in order to protect the tribal people, their habitat, and their livelihoods have more than occasionally been misinterpreted as favoring tribal nativism with overblown demographic fears fanning hatred for communities such as the Chakma, Hajong in Arunachal Pradesh and Mizoram. Unfortunately, the political forces have also limited themselves to using ethnic fissures for power and sustenance, uprooting communities that fled their homelands under duress and have since been well settled in their adopted areas, contributing to diversity of culture and the economy, would be a violation of their rights and repeating a historic wrong. A dialogue between the state government, civil society, and those of the Chakma Hajong communities would go a long way in addressing concerns in implementing the court judgment of 2015 rather than the course currently adopted by Itanagar. Implementing the NHRC directive should be a step in the process to reverse that course. Hope in Burkina Faso. Juntas without political legitimacy have only worsened the crisis in West Africa. Burkina Faso, once known as one of the most suitable countries in West Africa, has been mired in a deadly cycle of jihadist violence since 2015. Monday's Cope, in which mutinous soldiers overthrew the democratically elected government of President Roch-Marc Christian Kabore, was a direct result of this growing instability which the government failed measurably to tackle. Mr. Kabul was elected president in 2015 almost all at the time jihadists belonging to Al Qaeda and the Islamic State were expanding across Sahel region. They turned the vast countryside of this landlocked country bounded by Mali and Niger, both rocked by Islamist violence, into ungovernable territories. Over the last 7 years, at least 2,000 people have been killed and over 1 million displaced in this country of 22 million people. The military and large sections of the civilians saw the Cabo government as ineffective, corrupt, and out of touch with the ground reality. The coronavirus pandemic and the associated economic woes have also pushed the Burkinabé people further into misery. An uprising touched off in the streets of Ouagadougou, the capital city, a few days ago was followed by mutiny. The soldiers moved in quickly surrounding the presidential palace. West Africa has been a series of successful coups in recent months. In September 2021, special forces in Guinea ousted the government and captured power. In Mali, the military staged a coup for the second time in less than a year. In May, in Mali, the military staged a coup for the second time in less than a year in May 2021, while in Chad, the president was killed in conflict in April. Sudan saw the military throwing out a power sharing agreement it had reached with the civilian revolutionaries and taking the levers of the state in its hands. The ease with which the generals captured power in all these countries should be a warning to other elected governments on the continent. While taking power, all these military leaders promised elections, but soon their focus shifted to tightening their grip on power rather than resolving the crisis that they used to justify their power grab or allowing transition to a legitimate government. The story of Burkina Faso is not different. The coup was reportedly welcomed by protesters in the streets of Ouagadougou. It is understandable because the people, fed up with the jihadist violence and the states unable to tackle it, may have thought the men in uniform could at least provide them better security. But this support could be short lived as the power hungry junta faces a terrorist machinery spread across the Sahel along with the post coup political divisions and instability at home. Coups are hardly a solution to the many crises those countries face. Rather than juntas which lack political legitimacy and up making them worse. Not, yeah, yeah. I am of the same opinion. Distorting history through a calendar by propagating false narratives on Indian ancestry, the IITs are damaging their standing. Built at the site of an infamous detention center set up by the British government, the Indian Institution of Technology, Kharagpur, was the first IIT to be commissioned. Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, who gave a memorable convocation address at IIT Kharagpur in 1956, said, "Here in the place of that Hisley detention camp stands the fine monument of India, representing India's future in the making. The picture seems to me symbolically of the changes that are coming to India. Notwithstanding the criticism of encouraging brain drain and generating intense admission competition among school-going students, leading to the entrenchment of an unhealthy institution culture, the premier IITs continue to have transformative presence in India's technical and science education system. Nehru was indeed right in saying that the IITs are India's future in the making, but strangely, IIT Kharagpur is in the news not for its role in shaping the future, but for distorting a past to advance a particular social agenda, unscientific narrative. In its new calendar for 2022, IIT Kharagpur's new center of excellence for Indian knowledge system has propagated an unscientific narrative on the beginnings of our ancestry. Titled Recovery of the Foundations of Indian Knowledge Systems, this calendar presents a very confusing collage of symbols and images with patently distorted ideas. The intention of the calendar is to establish an alternate premise that the Aryans, the carriers of Vedic culture, were indigenous to the Indus Valley and surrounding regions. This premise advances the theme that those people were the custodians of the Indus Valley civilization that had been active for more than 10,000 years and that eventually spread its culture influence westwards from India. This is called the out of India theory. As the historian Charles Allen stated in his book, such a revisionism files in the face of all the evidence, archaeologists are archaeogenetics, archaeological, linguistic, geological, botanical, geographical, and theological. The evidence informs us that the pre-Indian state civilizational beginnings are associated with the Harappans, the earliest settlers and belonging to greater Indus Valley civilization whose culture extends from 7000 2000 BC. The remnants of their settlements are located around the Indus River, Kutch, Saurashtra, parts of Balochistan, and the Marker Coast. Engaged in agriculture and trade, they were adept at designing well laid out townships with a good system of water management. They used bullock drawn carts, predominantly centered on farming. These communities slowly declined as a result of increasing aridity and declining summer rainfall. The archaeological evidence also suggests that during the late Harappan period, the Rigvedic people entered into Indian subcontinent through present-day Iran and Afghanistan. These pastoral migrants and their grazing animals, including horses, came from the Eurasian steppes into the Indus Valley region in batches to mingle with the dark-skinned settlers of the Indus Valley. Although not an invasion in the classical sense, as the American archaeologist George Dales had noted, Harappans met their end not with an Aryan bang, but with an Indus expatriates whimper, but in the in-group, out-group dynamics that may have played out in such a cultural landscape may have encouraged caste-based social hierarchy, allowing the resourceful newcomers to dominate and forcing the earlier settlers to be marginalized and migrate possibly southwards. The results of excavations from Kejadi in Tamil Nadu provide further evidence of the extent spread of the non-Vedic culture towards South India until 2200 years ago. Recent archaeogenetic studies provide as a firmer scientific foundation to the theory of Aryan migration from the Eurasian steppes. For instance, the mitochondrial DNA designated haplorg of some of the social groups in India share a common genetic ancestral lineage. With Eastern Europeans, it is suggested that Halo group mutated out of Apgrong Arogonia in the Eurasian steppes about 14,000 years ago. Thus, these studies support the out of the East European steppes theory. It also means that the original form of Indo-European languages was first spoken in Eastern Europe, the original homeland. It is likely that a group of nomads who shared the genomic subclad R1A1A left their homeland and moved east towards the Caspian grasslands, where they tamed horses, goats, and dogs and learned to build horse-drawn chariots essential for nomadic life. Around 900 BC, these people broke up and one group proceeded towards what is now Iran and the other to India. Those who entered India around 1500 BCE established the dominant civilization in the northwest. By then, much of older Harappan settlers had either become marginalized or had moved to southern and central India and even to parts of Balochistan. The newly settled people, the so-called Aryans, worshipped fire, were not builders like the Harappans but are likely to have been better storytellers. Two recently published scientific papers reporting the archaeogenomic studies of the early settlers of Central and South Asia chart the genetic trail of the hunter-gatherers, Iranian farmers, and pastoralists from the Caspian steppes and explain how they may have intermingled to become the makers of some of the world's earliest civilizations. Obtained from a skeleton of women from a 5,000-year old Indus Valley civilization settlement in the village of Rakigari in the Hisar district of Haryana, the companion paper tracks the lineage of the people who settled in the Indus Valley. The DNA from the skeleton shows no detectable ancestry from the steppe pastoralist from Antonian and the Iranian farmers, suggesting farming in South Asia rose from local forages rather than from large-scale migration from the West. This conclusion, with the caveat that a single sample cannot fully characterize the entire population, reinforces the prevailing notion on the origins of the Harappan settlers. It is also likely that there could be more genetic commonality between earlier settlers from Africa and the Harappan people. Retreat of region. The January page of IIT calendar starts with a statement The tributaries of Indus, as mentioned in the Rig Veda, are sourced to the Sevalik ranges in the central eastern Himalayas. The Sevaliks are the low altitude southernmost hill ranges of the Himalayas, from where no major rivers are sourced. If this is not a deliberate distortion of the for the use of false messaging, is this apparent lack of geographical understanding for those who are pioneering the studies of Indian knowledge system is shocking. This is the calendar maker's resort to obfuscation of facts becomes obvious in other pages. For instance, as Meera Nanda pointed out, karmic retribution and the idea of rebirth are not part of early Vedic tradition, but they are from the Buddha Jaina streams of thought that was later incorporated in the Upanishads. The IIT Kharagpur 2022 calendar is an indication of now how the Indian knowledge system is going to be deliberated in our higher learning centers. We need to be wary of its impact on the future generations. Such a center signals the retreat of religion and free inquiry in education. C.P. Rajendran is an adjunct professor of the National Institute of Advanced Studies, Bengaluru. Views are personal. Towards the low emission growth. For climate and development's sake, India needs to bring back industrial policy, only differently this time. Climate change is one of the defining challenges of this current century. Without a global effort to rapidly reduce greenhouse gas emissions, average global temperatures are likely to exceed 2 degrees centigrade even with current policies in place. While many developing countries may net zero pledges at COP26, they face enormous challenges in their attempts to grow in climate constrained world. In India, there is a high youth unemployment and hunger for substantial investments in hard infrastructure to industrialize and urbanize. Unlike the energy intensive growth trajectories of the industrialized world, India's economic growth in the last 3 decades, led by growth in the service sector, has come at a significantly lower emissions footprint. But in the coming decades, India will have to move to an investment led and manufacturing intensive growth model. Can India do this with a low emissions footprint? A green industrialization strategy. While Prime Minister Narendra Modi's announcement that India will strive to reach net zero emissions by 2070 is commendable, it is essential to follow through with short, medium, and long-term guiding strategies to ensure that India can maximize developmental gains in this transition. What India needs is a green industrialization strategy that combines laws, policy instruments, and implementing institutions to steer its decentralized economic activities to become climate friendly and resilient. A market steering approach rather than a hands-off approach would encourage private sector investments in technologies needed to industrialize under climate constraints. While India has provided a high level of policy support to deploy renewable energy, its industrial policy efforts to increase the domestic manufacturing of renewable energy technology components have been affected by policy incoherence, poor management of economic rents, and contradictory policy objectives. Academic research provides evidence that policies to develop local innovation capabilities alongside linking with global production networks create the most job opportunities. China's technological policy strategies strategically align our RD&D manufacturing and deployment of solar and wind technologies paid off not only in its global competitiveness to produce energy technologies but also in creating more domestic job opportunities than India's approach to prioritizing only deployment. China has created more jobs in manufacturing solar and wind components for exports than domestic deployment. India could have retained some of those jobs if it were strategic in promoting these technologies. Besides China, Korea's Green Growth Strategy and the US Endless Frontier Act passed in the Senate in 2021 to make significant RD&D investments in emerging future technologies are examples of techno-industrial policy strategies. Recent decarbonization modeling studies not only point to a significant role for battery, green and green hydrogen, carbon capture and storage technologies to decarbonize India's transport and industry sectors. While India may have lost the bus in terms of catching up on solar PV innovations, technologies needed to decarbonize the transport and industry sectors provide significant opportunity. However, India's R&D investments in these emerging green technologies are non-existent. The production linked incentive under Atmanirbhar Bharat are a step in the right direction for localizing the clean energy manufacturing activities. Nevertheless, they still do not address Atmanirbhar's economic uh, goal to move from incremental changes to quantum jumps on in economic activities. Aligning existing RD&D investments with the technologies needed for green industrialization is crucial for releasing quantum jumps. Besides, India also needs to nurture private entrepreneurship and experimentation in clean energy technologies. An industrial policy approach is necessary for gaining development co-benefits from the structural transition that climate change demands. The way forward, India's energy transition should be development focused and aim to extract economic and employment trends from decarbonization. The government should neither succumb to rash international pressure to decarbonize soon, nor should it postpone its investment in decarbonization technologies. Instead, India should set its pace based on its ability to capitalize on the opportunities to create wealth through green industrialization. India should follow a path where it can negotiate carbon space to grow, buying time for the hard to abate sectors, push against counterproductive WTO trade litigations on decarbonization technologies, all while making R&D investments in those technologies. A renewed push for Hindutva. The BJP in Tamil Nadu is losing no opportunity to posture itself as guardian of the Hindus. BJP leaders in Tamil Nadu appear to be jealously working to spot issues that could be woven into their Hindutva narrative. They have come a long way from the time the old guard would only sell the BJP as a party with difference and shorn of lumpen elements and be reluctant to declare its pro-Hindu agenda. Back then, state politics was dominated by Jayalalitha and Karunanidhi. The present crop of leaders is losing no opportunity to posture itself as a guardian of the Hindus, whose interests and claims are being compromised by the ruling DMK. Presently, it has latched on to the death by suicide of a class 12 girl who was studying in a Christian missionary run institution as a resident inmate in Tanjavur district. Through the police arrested a sexagenarian warden under the Juvenile Justice Act as the girl alleged she was forced to do course in the hostel. The issue took a political turn when a 45-second video clip surfaced. In the clip, the girl is heard saying that 2 years ago her parents were asked if they would convert her to Christianity. A male voice is heard asking so because you did not convert, they troubled you. To this, she response could be citing the video the BJP launched the statewide protest alleging that the school attempted to forcefully convert the girl and is seeking justice for Tamil Nadu Hindu girl. BJP State President K. Annamalai has recently Tanjavur Superintendent of Police Ravali Priya's statement that there is no religious angle to the girl's death, but leaders want the school where many Hindu students study shut down. The issue is sub judice with the girl's parents moving the Madurai bench of the Madras High Court seeking the CBCID probe. The National Commission for Protection of Child Rights, acting on a BJP member's complaint, has sought a report from Director General of Police. Incidentally, 3 days before the girl died, BJP leaders are outraging over a satirical show on a Tamil television channel in which two children donning the roles of king and minister mock demonetization and disinvestment. Mr. Annamalai said Al Murli and Murugan, his predecessor and now Minister for Information and Broadcasting, had assured him of action as the so demeaned the Prime Minister. The IB and INB ministry issued notice to the TV channel citing a complaint from a BJP functionary. The credit for giving a renewed push to the Hindutva agendas goes to Mr. Murugan. Shortly after being appointed BJP state president during the COVID-19 pandemic, had ranked up the issue of a little known Tamil YouTube channel insulting the Kannada Sasti Kavasam, a holy hymn sung in praise of Lord Muruga, regarded as a Tamil Hindu god. He launched a Vetri Vel Yatra, going from one board of Lord Muruga to another, hoping to consolidate Hindu votes. Many BJP leaders shared photos and videos of them performing puja for their newly purchased whale, Lord Muruga's spare, in their households. Essentially, Lord Muruga replaced Lord Ram in Tamil Nadu for a limited purpose in the BJP scheme of things. It's ally. The IIDM get the power then declared holiday for Thai Pushami festival when Lord Muruga is propitiated. Incidentally, the DMK has not tinkered with this religious holiday, perhaps not wanting to give the BJP and the opportunity to accuse it of bias against Hindus. Given that the electorate had rejected attempts by Jayalalitha to polarize Hindu votes and forced her to repeal an anti-conversion law and a ban on animal sacrifice in temples, it remains to be seen if the BJP's efforts would pay political dividends now. Assistance for overcoming suicidal thoughts is available on the state's health helpline 104 and Sneha suicide prevention helpline. That's all. The Nation's warning. London, Jan 22. The Observer commenting on the fact that liberal opinion is now recognizing that Mr. Gandhi's campaign can only result in anarchy, says it will certainly strengthen Lord Reading's hands in the policy of firmness and tolerance to know that all shades of progressive opinion in England fully realize the grave dangers to India and the Indian people with which he is coping. It will strengthen his hands of the violence which neither Mr. Gandhi preaches nor practices, but unfailingly evokes, forces the government of India to take action of the kind for which Sir Sankaran Nair and his friends have vainly looked. Non-cooperation, says the Observer, contains the seeds of its own destruction, and we trust at the passing of Gandhism may result from natural causes without provoking serious intervention. But undoubtedly, the stake is nothing less than the liberties of India and the future of India and its people in the world. London, Jan 23. A significant indication of the trend of liberal opinion with regard to India is afforded by a leading article in The Nation, which emphasizes that it is not a question merely by the British Raj and the civilization of thousands of years which is at stake, but our responsibility for the peoples of India who have no experience for capacity for government cannot be abandoned. Awards for Vadeka Chandrasekhar, Jan 25, New Delhi. Bombay born L. Vadeka, who led India to the first ever Test cricket victory. Because General Rawat Kalyan get Padma Vibhushan for Ghulam Nabi Azad and Baba and Buddhadev Bhattacharjee. General Bipin Rawat, India's first Chief of Defence Staff, who died in an air crash recently, and former Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister Kalyan Singh, who headed the state during Babri Masjid demolition, was selected for Padma Vibhushan posthumously on the eve of Republic Day. Padma Vibhushan, part of the Padma series, is the second highest civilian award. Congress leader and former Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir Ghulam Nabi Azad and former West Bengal CM Buddha Dev Bhattacharjee awarded with Padma Bhushan. Bharat Biotech's Suchitra and Krishna Ella, Serum Institute of India, Siras Poonawalla were recorded with Padma Bhushan along with Natarajan Chandrasekharan, chairman of Tata Sons, Olympian Neeraj Chopra, gold medalist of at 2021 Tokyo Olympics, Avani Lakera and singer Sonu Nigam were given Padma Shri. Satya Narayana Nadella, Chairman and CEO of Microsoft Corporation, Sundararajan Pichai, CEO Google and Alphabet, were accorded with Padma Bhushan. Punjabi singer Gurmeet Bawa was given Padma Bhushan posthumously. Former Union Home Secretary and CAG Rajiv Maharshi was also conferred with Padma Bhushan. Okay, West is united against Russia. Biden. Pentagon says 8,500 US troops were put on standby for possible deployment to boost NATO. US President Joe Biden declared total unity among Western powers on Monday after crisis talks with European leaders on deterring Russia from an attack against Ukraine. While the Pentagon said 8,500 US troops were put on standby for possible deployment to boost NATO, I had a very, very good meeting. Total unanimity with all the European leaders. Mr. Biden told reporters shortly after finishing a 1 hour and 20-minute video conference with allied leaders from Europe and NATO. In London, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson office also said the leaders agreed on the importance of international unity in the face of growing Russian hostility. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said it is up to Russia to undertake visible de-escalation, while NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg warned of severe costs if there is any further aggression by Moscow against Ukraine. Also on the call were the leaders of France, Italy, Poland, and the European Union. In Washington, Pentagon spokesman John Kirby said a force of up to 8,500 US troops was on heightened alert for potential deployment to reinforce any activation of the NATO response from force in the region, where there are growing fears of spillover from the Ukraine conflict. What this is about is a reassurance to our NATO allies. Mr. Kibli said it sends a very clear signal to Mr. Putin that we take our responsibilities to NATO seriously. NATO also said it was sending jets and ships to bolster its eastern flank. The French government announced that Russian and Ukraine officials would meet along with French and German counterparts in Paris on Wednesday to try to find way out of the impasse. French and President Emmanuel Macron thinks there is a space for diplomacy, a path to de-escalation. Aide said, confirming that Mr. Macron would speak to Mr. Putin in the coming days. Washington is trying to maintain transatlantic unity to build a credible threat of sanctions as a deterrence against Moscow. However, members of the 27 nation EU have starkly differing approaches and ties to Russia, which supplies about 40% of the trade bloc's natural gas supplies. NATO on standby. The US-led NATO alliance said Members were placing troops on standby and sending ships and jets to bolster Eastern Europe's defenses, pointing to recent mobilization by Denmark, Spain, and the Netherlands. Mr. Stoltenberg said the alliance will continue to take all necessary measures to protect members. The Kremlin accused NATO of hysteria. It also claimed that Ukrainian troops fighting Russian-backed separatists in the east of the country could launch an offensive, uh, prompting President Volodymyr Zelensky's office to say that Ukraine will not succumb to provocations. Pfizer Biotech starts trials for Omicron-specific vaccine. Goal is to examine immune response of inoculated persons. Agence France Press Washington, Pfizer and its partner BioNTech have begun enrollment for clinical trials to test the safety and immune response of their Omicron-specific COVID-19 vaccine in adults aged up to 55. The company said in a statement Tuesday. Pfizer's CEO Albert Bourla has previously said that the pharmaceutical giant could be ready to file for regulatory approval of the sort by March. For the sake of caution, the company's head of vaccine research, Catherine Jansen, said in a statement that while current data showed that boosters against the original COVID-19 strain continued to protect against severe outcomes with Omicron, the company was acting out of caution. We recognize the need to be prepared in the event this protection wanes out over time and to potentially help address Omicron and new variants in the future, is said. Oxygen CEO of Biotech added that the protection of the original vaccine against mild and moderate COVID-19 appeared to wane rapidly against Omicron. This study is a part of our science-based approach to develop a variant-based vaccine. Age group. The trial will involve 1,420 people aged 18 to 55. Spokesman for Pfizer said that it did not include people older than 55 because the goal of the study was to examine the immune response of participants dosed rather than estimated vaccine efficacy. The trial is taking place across the United States and South Africa, and the first participants was dosed in North Carolina. The Pfizer Biotech vaccine was the first COVID shot to be authorized in the West in December 2020. Policy Act to identify Manitoba victims. Almost a week after a family of four, including a teenager and an infant, were found frozen to death in Emerson, Manitoba, Canada, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police say they have not yet established the identity of the deceased, thought to be Indian. Several news reports had identified a family of four, originally from Gujarat, thought to be those who had died. The RCMP continues to work to confirm the identities of the four victims who are located on Wednesday. Statement released on January 24 said. The Hindu had approached the Canadian police on Wednesday asking for a confirmation of the identity and was directed to this statement. We are also in regular contact with the Indian consular officials who have arrived in Manitoba. Once the identities have been confirmed, our priority will be to formally notify the next of kin, they said. We are aware that some media outlets are publishing the possible identities of four victims. As a law enforcement organization, we will not be in a position to confirm these names until we have 100% certainty of their identities and next of kin notification is completed, the statement said. 7 Indians were located by US authorities just within the country's borders on last Wednesday. All migrants who legally entered the United States were administratively processed for removal and or placed into removal proceedings as per the Immigration and Nationality Act. Chris Grogan, Customs and Border Protection Public Affairs Officer, told the Hindu over email on Wednesday. In a press statement last week, CBP had said all 7 were undocumented migrants. The Hindu reached out to officers at the Indian Embassy in Washington and the Indian Consulate in Chicago on Tuesday for information on the case, but did not hear back from them. Russia launches new military exercise near Ukraine border. Russia on Tuesday launched new military exercises near Ukraine and in annexed Crimea as it accused the US of ratcheting up tensions by putting several thousands of its own troops on alert. With the West already accusing Moscow of amassing more than 1 lakh soldiers on the Ukrainian border, the Russian military said it had launched drills involving 6,000 troops in the south and the Crimean Peninsula annexed by Moscow in 2014. The drills involve combat firing exercises with fighter jets, bombers, and aircraft systems and ships from the Black Sea and Caspian fleets. The ministry said the West is accusing Russia of preparing a potential invasion of pro-Western Ukraine, and tensions with Moscow have reached levels not seen since the Cold War. The US has warned that Moscow could manufacture a false flag incident in Ukraine. Ukraine said on Tuesday it had dismantled a group of saboteurs coordinated by Russian special services who had planned a series of armed attacks. Ukrainian SBU security service said it had seized weapons and arrested two residents, one of them a Russian citizen operating in eastern and central Ukraine. Norway wants to put tangible demands on Taliban at talks, sharing stage with the world is a success in itself, says group. Norway said it will put tangible demands on Taliban during talks in Oslo on Tuesday, the last day of the headline Islamist controversial first visit to Europe since returning the power in Afghanistan. A Taliban delegation led by Foreign Minister Amir Khan Muttaqis has been in Norway since Saturday for talks focused on humanitarian aid to Afghanistan. This is not the beginning of an open-ended process, said State Secretary Henrik Tone, who was to sit down with the delegation on Tuesday. Follow up. We are going to place tangible demands that we can follow up on and see if they have been met. He told Norwegian news agency NTV the demands will include the possibility of providing humanitarian aid directly to the Afghan people. According to NTV, it will call for human rights to be respected, in particular those of women and minorities, such as access to education and health services, the right to work, and freedom of movement. Norway is also expected to raise the plight of two women activists who went missing in Kabul last week after taking part in demonstration. The Taliban have denied responsibility. Norway providing us this opportunity is an achievement in itself because we shared the stage with the world, Foreign Ministry Muttaqi said on Monday. Moscow adds Navalny allies to list of terrorists. This puts them on par with Taliban IS. Russia on Thursday added jailed Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny and a number of his allies to list of terrorists and extremists as authorities further clamp down on the opposition. Mr. Navalny and a number of allies, including key aide Lyubov Sobol, appeared on Tuesday in a database of banned individuals compiled by the Federal Service for Financial Monitoring. Almost all of his top allies have since fled the country. According to Mr. Navalny Anti-Corruption Foundation, which was declared extremist and shut down last year, a dozen Navalny allies were added to the list on Tuesday. They include anti-corruption investigator Georgi Abdul, lawyer of the West. We urges Burkina Faso military to free president. The United Nations on Tuesday deplored the military takeover in Burkina Faso and called for the immediate release of President Roch, Marc Christian Kabore, and other top officials. The UN Human Rights Office said it was crucial to preserve democratic space in the West African nation. We call on the military to immediately release President Roch, Marc Christian Kabore, and other high-level officials who have been detained. Spokesman Ravina Samdashni told reporters in Geneva. Soldiers in Burkina Faso on Monday announced that they had seized power following a mutiny over the Syrian president's failure to contain an Islamist insurgency. A junior officer announced the suspension of the constitution, the dissolution of the government and parliament, and the closure of borders. Kurds locked in prison standoff with jihadists. US-backed Kurdist forces tightened the noose around armed jihadists hunking down inside a Syrian prison on Tuesday, with both sides facing bloodbath or talks to end the 5-day-old standoff. Around 100 Islamic State group fighters attacked the Gwayan prison in the northwestern city of front page. Let us see. India has shown unmatched resolve in facing COVID-19 threat. President, a strong sense to countries now emerging, he says in Republic Day message. The pandemic management was bound to be all the more difficult in India. We have high population density, and as a developing economy, we do not have the level of resources and infrastructure needed to battle this invisible enemy. I am proud to say that we have shown unmatched resolve against the coronavirus. President Ramnath Kovind on Tuesday said the country has shown unmatched resolve in the face of the extraordinary challenge posed to humankind by the coronavirus pandemic and asserted that a strong and sensitive India is now emerging. Addressing the nation on the eve of 73rd Republic Day, President Kovind noted that democracy, justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity from the bedrock of India and urged the people to celebrate Indianness this Republic Day. As Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, the President said that this year was a watershed year for women's empowerment, with India's daughters breaking the glass ceiling as permanent commission has now been allowed for women officers in new areas, and the armed forces will benefit from better gender balance. President Kovind urged urged citizens to not lower their guard and keep following COVID appropriate behavior such as wearing masks and maintaining social distance. It has been an extraordinary challenge to humankind. The pandemic management was bound to be all the more difficult in India. We have a high population density, and as a developing economy, we do not have the level of resources and infrastructure needed to battle this invisible enemy. But it is only in such a difficult times that the resilience of a nation shines forth. I am proud to say that we have shown unmatched resolve against the coronavirus, is said. Center to remind states again of IS cadre rules. 7 BJP ruled states give consent. 8 states oppose plan. The Department of Personnel and Training DOPT will send another reminder to states to respond to its proposal to amend the India Administrative Service cadre rules 1954, with which Indian Administrative Service and IS and IPS and Indian Forest Service officers could be deputed to the union government and ministries without necessarily taking the state government's nod. So far, 16 states have responded. 7 states, Haryana, Manipur, Madhya Pradesh, Tripura, Uttar Pradesh, Gujarat, and Arunachal Pradesh, all governed by BJP, have given their consent to the proposal. 5 states, Odisha, Meghalaya, Jharkhand, Rajasthan, West Bengal, have responded to the DOPT opposing the amendments. The chief ministers of 3 other states, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, and Telangana, have written to the Prime Minister to register their opposition. A senior government official said that January 25 was the deadline to respond, but as many states have not sent their replies, the Ministry of Personnel, Public Grievance, and Pensions will send another reminder this week. The union government is facing an acute shortage of all India services officers, and despite existing provisions, states are not sponsoring adequate numbers of officers for central deputation, and the available officers are not sufficient to meet requirements, the DOPT has said. As reported by the Hindu, the DOPT had earlier sent 3 letters on December 20, December 27, and January 6, seeking comments from the states, but after of a dozen states opposed the move and the rest did not respond. If further revised the proposal on January 12, the initial proposal of December 20 only had 2 amendments. First, states had to send a list of all officers available for the central deputation reserve, and the actual number of officers to be deputed shall be decided by the central government in consultation with the state government's consent. And second, in case of any disagreement, the state will give effect to the decision of the center within a specified time. Thank you.